Hey everyone, this was taped in August at the Midwest Peace and Liberty Fest. A lot of great people that I got the opportunity to meet out there, and this is someone that I had the opportunity to meet, Daniel McCarthy. He had written a book called The Road to Nowhere. It's about chasing utopia, and he has a great take. He's a brilliant young man, and really had a great chat with him. So I wanted to share it. Had the opportunity to just do an impromptu podcast with him at the festival, and this is what happened. So I hope you enjoy.
Okay, so you really want to know, huh? Fine. I'm going to start by telling you this. And this is important, so listen up. Your entire life, this one and many others, you've been a god who uses its absolute power to make yourself powerless. Entire cultures, especially this one, have all been afraid of their weaknesses, supposedly, when in reality, they've all been afraid of their power. This goes beyond the matrix of reality. This is something much deeper than that. This is eternal. This is fully realizing your consciousness. This is infinite. This is evolution. This is our divine right.
Okay, I am with Daniel McCarthy, and we are in a tent, and when we walk out of here, we're probably going to look like we were doing mad, passionate things to one another in this thing, because it's a little bit warm, but we're at the Midwest Peace and Liberty Festival, and I'm really excited to be able to talk with you. You got a book called The Story of Nowhere and a podcast by the same name, and I love what you're exploring, and I'm excited to talk about it a little bit with you and how it applies to us, you know, on a day-to-day life and our motivation. So welcome, dude. Thank you so much for being a part of this impromptu podcast in the middle of a Peace Festival.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, dude, absolutely. That's so cool. This is why I came here. I came here to connect with people and talk to people and really learn. All that said, I think it's really an interesting concept. So if you don't mind, you know, tell people about your book and why you started writing it and what it's about.
Sure. So, again, like you said, the title is The Story of Nowhere, and the explanation behind that title is that the word utopia is actually Greek for nowhere, or no place, more specifically. So, that's the explanation behind that, and I think there's something really meaningful just in that etymology of the word utopia, that it actually means nowhere, as in a place that does not exist anywhere on the terrestrial realm, and it will not exist, ostensibly. So there is no utopia, there never has been, and there never will be. And yet, utopianism, as I've understood it and continue to study it, is this unceasing belief that people can be perfected. You know, I could put it in a nutshell simply by saying that it is the belief that people can be perfected. And what that means isn't just that, you know, we're all nice to each other. It means that our institutions, those things which preserve our ability to interact with each other and improve our abilities to interact with each other, that those can reach some ultimate pinnacle of realization. I simply don't believe that to be true. And unfortunately, it seems that throughout history, so many people have believed it to be true, such that they were willing to commit massive amounts of just murder and theft, and a number of other things. I mean, war has pragmatic origins, but it also has these idealistic origins, and often I think those are linked to utopianism. So, in the book, I really try to keep it general. I have a whole section defining what exactly I mean by utopianism. I know I'm being a little vague right now in general for the sake of conversation, but in the book, I really try to nail it down because it's such an abstract word, and I've heard a lot of different people refer to utopia and utopianism, but never give a real definition. So I spend a good amount of time doing that, but then the rest of the book is a very general sprint through history. here's a utopia, here's a utopia, here's a utopia, and here's how they all came crashing down and actually destroying the lives they purported to be about saving.
Cool. Well, that's awesome, man. I think the book is a really good size. It seems really digestible and boiled down really simply, which is really cool. What are some of those civilizations that you point to in the book?
Sure. So, let's see. The first two chapters actually discuss more about myths and, I guess you could say, the psychological phenomenon of utopia as it began in the ancient world. So after that, I cover the Middle Ages, and I think that the Middle Ages get a bad rap in a lot of ways. I won't get into that right now, but there was a sort of overarching ideology in Western Europe from the period of approximately 500 AD to 1500 AD that the Roman Catholic Church in particular was given the divine order to save the planet Earth and, in effect, realize the Garden of Eden, the conditions of paradise. So in this third chapter, I talk about how there's this pattern of utopians often to point to a prior golden age. Because if I were just to walk up to you on the street and say, hey, man, one day everything's going to be great. You're not going to be hungry. The lambs will lie down with the lions and all of that stuff. You're going to be rather incredulous. You're going to say, I don't think so.
Right.
But if I can point and say, well, look, it was like that before. There was this place called Garden of Eden. That's where we all come from, blah, blah, blah. Then in the minds of the individuals hearing these stories over and over again, it makes it more plausible. And so I think that in the Middle Ages, the Christian mission was to essentially return to the conditions of prehistoric utopia in a post-historic world, by history actually coming to an end in the book of Revelation. So I talk about that. I talk about, skipping ahead a few chapters into the more modern era, I talk about the secular scientific utopianism of the French and American revolutionaries and their desire to transcend that sort of Judeo-Christian model, but they still believed in a coming post-historical era. They still believed that there would come a point where human beings would transcend their flaws, and they also, a lot of them anyway, believed that before civilization, there was, in fact, a golden age, Eden-esque utopia. It just wasn't Adam and Eve, it was like Indians, living off the land and living in harmony with each other. So those are just a couple. And the last one I talk about is the modern era, and I get into a lot of technocratic stuff.
Transhumanism.
Yes, precisely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that makes sense. That seems like the new thing where it's like, oh, we'll be able to hook into the internet and everything will be great then because we'll be hooked to the internet and we can just access stuff or have this experience and dial it up or whatever, which it sounds creepy to me, frankly, but and I guess I don't want to really necessarily go too much into that. I really want to kind of stay on topic of, the idea of utopia, kind of holding this carrot out and the ends justifying the means, which is like, cool, if we can get to utopia via the path of utopia, let's fucking do it. You know what I mean? Like, if we can implement the principles that are supposedly going to be embraced once we get to utopia right now, shouldn't reality just shift into utopia as opposed to like this, hey, we'll get there soon, but we got to kill a bunch of people first, right?
Yes, it always seems to work that way.
It's funny how that happens. But let me ask you this. What got you into this particular study?
Well, geez, for years.
Yeah. Hey,
come on, man.
Four-wheeler rides. Come on, bro. Take it easy.
For years, ever since I was a kid, I was interested in history and philosophy and all sorts of adjacent studies, anthropology. And so as I got older, it became more apparent to me that there must be something linking all of my interests together and all these things that no one else seems to care about. But I could never figure out what it was. And for a while, I got really interested in the study of propaganda. And I was actually a decent way through writing a book about specifically propaganda through history. And I sort of hit a wall and became very dejected, and then put that project aside and said, look, I just need to figure out what's connecting all of my interests, because I can't pick one thing. Because if I choose propaganda to be the thing I spend 2 years on, well, then what about cybernetics? What about ancient history? What
Right.
about mythology?
Right.
Well, I need to get all of these things. What connects them? And so finally, what happened was I was actually rereading the draft of that book, the propaganda book. And in the very beginning, I talked about Plato's Republic, in which he outlines a sort of utopian state. And in that book, I was thinking of the utopianism of the Republic as a kind of form of propaganda. But for whatever reason, when I reread it, I realized I had it backwards. That propaganda was a function of his utopianism. That the propaganda is merely a means to the end of utopia.
Right.
And, I mean, honestly, it was like overnight. Once I had that, I was like, all right, I'm buying a domain. Like, this is what I'm doing. And ever since then...
That's all clearly not a utopia here.
Right. There will be engines forever. There's no getting away from that, not even in Eden.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, ever since then, I have been able to focus on the larger project of utopianism, recognizing that that's going to require some tangential sojourns into other subjects, such as propaganda and cybernetics, mythology, etc. So really, the best thing about this thing that I figured out is what I want to study is that it satisfies all of my intellectual desires. And I think that's probably a pretty good sign that you're on the right track.
Absolutely.
So that's really, it's sort of, I guess, selfish reasons that got me to the study. And then after that, once I really started looking at these historical utopias, I was like, oh, this is actually real. Like this, I actually might be onto something here.
That's so cool, man.
Yeah.
So to me, that's just a sign that you're on your purpose, and which
Mhm.
I think is awesome. I'm a big advocate of that. But I want to talk about a little bit what you said, when you're going through all these methods of studying these ideas and how there's a limited time. That's a real problem. You can't research everything. It's just impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And wondering if, too, that might be part of the reality that we find ourselves in. There's the flood of information with everything that just, happened over the past couple of years that's intentional, and there's different information and disinformation and yada, yada, yada. So in studying history, does it kind of seem like waking up from being like having a brownout, and being like, all right, let's kind of put our pieces together. What do we have here? What's connected? Like, as far as what do you really draw from when you're trying to put these pieces together? As you just go wherever it leads? Do you have a methodology? I know it all is under the umbrella of finding, utopian means toward basically control, I guess, and influencing human thought, behavior, etc. But what do you? I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say here, other than how do you know the information that you're getting, I guess, from history is going to be accurate, is going to be worth using or drawing from?
Sure. Well, I would say, as a rule of thumb, for anyone who's interested in history, particularly given the age that we live in with the internet, for however long we actually have access to it, the number one thing you got to do is get primary sources. So, for instance, right now I'm working on a podcast episode about the origins of the British Empire, which no one really seems to know much about. It's a very interesting story. And what's very nice about the present era is that I can go on archive.org and find a book, an old book, maybe written in the 1900s, 1800s, having to do with the British Empire. And rather than basing my entire project on one of these books, I can flip back into the bibliography of it, check some citations, and invariably, these people will cite a primary document that was actually written back in, let's say, 1576 or something.
Okay.
So all I got to do is write that title down and then punch it into archive.org. I'll say 7 or 8 out of 10 of the times I'll find it.
That's cool.
With older texts, I know if you're interested in studying more modern history, which I also am, you're more likely to find what you're looking for. But even stuff from like the 1500s, you're more likely than not to find somebody has scanned it. Some lunatic in some University of India library. As an aside, almost every primary source I'm using for this current show was uploaded by some Indian university. Like they've got all this imperial stuff in their universities, and someone's just scanning that. It's amazing. So we have the wonderful tool of being able to find primary documents for free if you have an internet connection. And so that would be my primary answer is primary sources. If you can get your hands on or your eyeballs on something that was actually published by the people you're talking about in the time period you're concerned with, you're not going to get much better than that. I mean, unless you're talking about footage of something happening. Primary sources are the way to go. And what I would recommend everyone do, if you are pulling from archive.org or something, download the PDF, save it, because it might not be there forever. Make your own backups, and what's nice about doing that is you'll find things that have been removed you still have access to, and there's a key in there. When you save something that might be deleted, you're also saving the whole bibliography. So there might be a citation in there that you really need.
Wow.
And if that hasn't been deleted, then you can also find it. So it's really important. And the justification behind being more concerned with primary documents is, I think, fairly obvious. The closer you can get to a historical event, the more likely you are to get not the actual facts, but the feelings and in-the-moment thoughts of the people who were present at the time. I don't necessarily think that it's more true, but you're going to get a better feel for what people at the time on the ground were actually thinking, and that's invaluable. And you'll also learn about different relationships people have. Another great trick that you can use as someone who's interested in history, forget all these government proclamations and stuff that, if you went to public school or something, you might assume that that's where history lies. In the Declaration of 19 whatever, that's where you're going to find the true history. But the case is actually, you're really going to find the most historically enlightening information in personal correspondence. If you can find a letter between Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, that's going to be of far more value than reading the Declaration of Independence if you actually want to understand the motivations behind a historical event.
Cool.
And that's another thing, archive.org, man. I'll shill for them all day.
Nice.
That's where you got to go.
That's cool. I love that. That's so cool. I love that. That's really a great tip, and a way to really cross-check everything, and a smart way to kind of go through the book. So as far as the Utopia thing in modern day parlances, what about people who are going to say, well, we can have a utopia, we just did it wrong, or have an idea, or trying their best and want to see the best. I'm an idealist, you know what I mean? Like, I want to see the best in people. I want, hippies to run around and naked or whatever they want to do. I don't care.
Right.
So, what about that? How can we kind of just be on our guard and, to talk to someone who's maybe a little bit resistant to the idea that there's no such thing as a utopia?
Well, the number one thing is being independent when it comes to the most important resources in your life, or as independent as possible. So I'm with you, man. I mean, I'd love for people just to be left alone and to kind of let the chips fall where they may, and I imagine that it'll actually turn out pretty fine. And it was something that people often forget, at least when we're talking about, like, I remember in school, the history class, even the ancient history class, would always start around 6000 BC in Sumer. It's like, well, 99% of human history stretches far before that. We've only been doing this civilization thing for a little bit.
Right.
Most of human history was spent organizing into small groups of tribes. And I'm not going to pretend that was perfect. There is this sort of noble savage myth that came up in the Enlightenment. I don't think that's right. I'm sure there were problems. I'm sure there was disease and sickness and war and whatever. But we need to acknowledge that there are other ways of doing things that do not rely on central institutions. Mm-hmm. That's the ticket. Mm-hmm. So I'm sympathetic with what you're saying. I also want to see the hippies running around. And if I don't want to hang out with the hippies, I want to be able to leave.
Yeah.
I'm not in favor of any sort of one-size-fits-all system that's going to supposedly ameliorate all of these things, all of these issues that nature has imposed on us. I don't think that it's reasonable to assume that it's for some reason the universe owes you an institution that could ensure that no child ever goes hungry.
Right.
Now, as much as I would like for no child to go hungry, the way to do that isn't to set up some gigantic house of cards. The way to do that is to secure local systems of food independence. That way, if this town goes hungry, but this other town nearby has a surplus, they're able to work something out. Whereas, as we witnessed in the last year with COVID, and it was somewhat of a pleasure to watch it happen, we realized and got to witness firsthand the failures of globalism when you shut down part of the economy and then other parts of it that you would never assume to be connected, well, they also suffer because it's a big web and it's all interconnected. And that's a problem. That's a problem if people rely on all these different things. And so the way towards, I don't want to say utopia, the way toward a responsible society is actually being as independent as possible. And the thing about most utopian systems that I've looked at, and indeed, I really think most utopian systems that have ever been attempted, have all been focused on a sort of centralization. At some point or another, the problem of centralization and distribution of resources enters into the picture, and it's always, invariably done under the guise of benevolence and almost a sort of salvationist rhetoric that says, look, this is how we're going to do it. We'll take all the food, we'll hold on to it, and then we'll make sure everyone gets their fair share. So that's what I resist. I resist the dependence. And, even the idea of utopianism itself would be rendered harmless if people were independent. If you and I sat here and came up with a utopian idea for a society, if the vast majority of human beings were independent, then what's to stop us from trying our utopia? We're not going to hurt anyone else.
Absolutely not.
It's only when these systems, in order to incentivize the layman and the average working person to get involved with the utopia, is by first making sure that you're dependent on institutions for information, for resources, for the education of your children, and for wealth. Those are the four things, I think. Well, I guess the hidden fifth one would be personal security. If a society can make you dependent on its central institutions for those five things, then, well, get ready for some utopian rhetoric soon, because they're going to have to justify that. But in the end, it just amounts to dependence, which is a fancy word for slavery,
Right.
I believe.
Sure. No, I track with you 100%. It's like making your own decision versus someone deciding for you. There's a huge difference there. I don't give a shit if you want to go live out in the woods in a loincloth or, decide that you want to live X, Y. I think there's a lot of different ways to live. I'll just say it that way,
Sure.
That could be fine for a lot of different people. There's not one right way to do anything, I don't believe. I just think that's silly,
Yeah.
There are better and worse ways to do certain things, but at the same time, like, it's really about it should be really, I think, easy to sniff out when it becomes that you don't have a choice anymore in this matter. It's like that's not good. But back to the centralization thing, if everything's going to get centralized and it's in the core common interest of everyone who's in the group, then there's always that justification, and it's always a sliding scale. There's never any static, moral code that governs society at that point.
Exactly. Well, and if we accept the premise that the utopia actually has the general good of the general public in mind, then if you and I resist it, we're not just dissenters, we're not just people who want to do something else. We are bad because we're almost committing violence against the average person who's getting swept along with the utopian current. That's the problem. You can't disagree. Because I know you might have another question. I'll just say briefly that the modern technological utopianism that I detail in my book, to an extent, I think for the first time we have the actual potential of realizing what is genuine totalitarianism. Hitler's tried, Stalin tried, Mao tried, and historians have called what they did totalitarianism, and I think they have done so rather sloppily, because it wasn't total. There were gaps. There were little air bubbles in the system where people were able to dissent, and not just dissent in theory, but actually do so effectively. I mean, people were able to get out of the Soviet Union. There were groups of teenage rebels in Nazi Germany who actually did damage. What we have now, with the technology being as ubiquitous as it is and being as ruled by, I mean, having been invented by the military for the most part and controlled by a small number of corporations, we have the possibility of entering into what is genuinely totalitarianism. 100% control over resources, speech, travel, etc. Because technology is the electrical, computer, internet-based technology is the ultimate tool for essentially keeping track of people. And if you can keep track of people, you can control what they do. So that's what we're confronted with now, and I believe that is totalitarianism in its effect. But that totalitarian vision has actually been the motivating factor behind Utopia going back to Plato's Republic, which was written 2,500 years ago, 2,400 years ago.
It's like a Monopoly game to get Boardwalk.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. It's like you hit the boardwalk, and finally with the iPhone and with the smartwatch and blah, 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 they got it. Maybe.
Maybe. I don't think so. Because I'll say this, because what you said before was like there were, no matter what, they tried totalitarianism. Stalin tried it, Mao tried. Even currently in North Korea, where they don't have a word for I, like the self, like everything's weak, there's still a black market. You know, there's still going to be something. People are going to find a way. Like in Jurassic Park, you know, and he like drops the dropper, life will find a way, you know, Jeff Goldblum.
Right.
Like that just rings in my head. You know, it might get more difficult. You know, it might be weird. I don't know. I don't know what's coming. It's going to get weird for sure. I can't predict it. But I think that no matter what, like the I don't even know how to say, like the quest for freedom, the thirst for, you know, sovereignty, the human spirit is indomitable ultimately. And I think that will keep things a little bit more honest. But I mean, I see definitely the infrastructure, but I still think there's always a way around. Like nature's still in charge ultimately too.
Yes.
I would say, you know.
I agree, and I hope that you're right about whatever it is about us that is human is indomitable, but I have to entertain
Did I say
healthy...
indomitable? I meant abominable. No.
Easy, Dr. Gates, easy. No, I hope you're right. Maybe you are. I have to entertain.
I mean,
though,
we'll never know.
Right.
I've taken the white pill because I can't live my life in a vibration or whatever, you know, state of mind that is like hopeless. It doesn't work for me. So even if there is a hope that maybe isn't all that likely, I'm still going to do that. I'm still going to go that route because it's emotionally the most healthy for me. I spent 3 years in my dad's basement, you know, studying conspiracy theories and all this stuff. Yeah, and it was great. But like at the same time, ultimately, I had to dig myself out of a bit of a pit of despair. And I think there's something beyond. I don't know, for lack of a better way to say it, I guess like nature knows about, like the things that pulled me out of that were Ralph Waldo Emerson, the Transcendentalists, and a book called Reality Transurfing that talks a lot about natural law. And what I see a lot as far as the controllers or whatever you want to call that is, and we were talking about this over the site a little while ago, is like putting those momentums in place, you know, like puppeteering or whatever. But ultimately, I think that nature has the upper hand, that ultimately there's no way you can dominate nature. It's just never going to happen.
What do you mean by nature?
I mean like natural law, physical law, as well as even up to and including like karmic balance. And I don't mean karma in the traditional sense like I, you know, bump you with my elbow and then I get hit in the face with a paper plane.
Right.
I just mean like balance itself, like trying to rig the game. Ultimately, that has implications that swing back.
Okay, so do you think that modern technology itself is in some way intrinsically unnatural, or do you think the way in which people powerful people use it is unnatural, or am I presenting a false dichotomy and is the answer something else?
No, I think any tool is neutral, in my opinion.
Okay.
Anything can be used for a good purpose or a bad purpose. I could stab you with a potato peeler, or I could peel a potato with it.
Sure.
So that's kind of how I view it, and I think that a lot of what we see around us is a reflection of the limitless expanse of infinity itself. That we see a film because it's at the effect. It's a mirror of reality. It's not the other way around, which a lot of people talk about. Like life is a movie. No. A movie reflects life.
Sure.
So, so from that sort of perspective, I really think there is an ultimate, like, sort of higher cause, and that might be part of what drives you on your purpose to expose this idea, and what drives me to, keep bombing comedy shows or whatever that thing is.
That's what you're supposed to do.
Right, exactly. I'm supposed to be talking about my taint on stage. It's important.
God
People
wills
need
it.
to hear this. But yeah, that's just my view, and I tell myself that I firmly believe it, but I tell myself that anyway. But that I think that anything is a tool and a reflection of the greater whole at large, and ultimately that we are fragmented aspects of God, going back into oneness. And in order to experience that's why we experience this conflict and the struggle. It's because we wouldn't know otherwise. It wouldn't be possible. It's like you can't have unconditional love that's untested. It
Right.
wouldn't be unconditional at that point.
Right.
So I guess, from my angle, it's about me sort of playing a role in this, and I'm trying to do my best.
I understand that. But I guess my skepticism is more in, I think, even though perhaps nature finds a way and perhaps the human spirit is indomitable, lots of people die and civilizations do collapse. And as I was saying earlier, the health of the state, there's the quote that war is the health of the state, and that's true, but I would say even more importantly to the health of the state is just dependence in general.
Yeah.
And the more people that are dependent on the state, and Lord knows,
It's a lot.
it's a lot, and it's not getting to be any less,
Right.
Especially after this past year, the more people that are dependent on the state, the more brittle the state becomes,
Mm-hmm.
and the more people are in the shadow of the collapsing edifice of the state when it finally comes down. Now, that doesn't mean that the human race goes extinct,
Right.
but it means a damn lot of people die in a bad way.
Sure.
And I know it's dismal, but I mean, it's not like this hasn't happened before.
Sure.
Empires do fall. If there's one thing they do, it's that.
Absolutely.
And they hurt a lot of people. And who do they hurt? They don't hurt the bushman. They don't hurt the peasant on the outskirts of the empire, because
Right.
he knows how to build a fire. He knows how to take care of his kids, and his wife knows how to make clothes. It's these pompous metropolitans who wind up getting the brunt of it. They're the ones who get eaten by barbarians. And the village folk laugh, and they're right to laugh. And this is the way it goes. And without trying to sound like a determinist, because I'm not, but I think that given the situation that we're in now, what we're staring down the barrel of is some sort of collapse. Maybe it's not a total collapse, but I think that our institutions are becoming less stable. And frankly, on one level, I think that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that I hope it's not so catastrophic that everyone who's dependent on them dies, or takes up arms in their defense, which is also another possibility. A total collapse would be bad because sheer loss of life, but a half collapse isn't that great either, because then you start getting a lot of factionalism, at least I think.
Right.
Excuse me.
No.
So, I'm optimistic insofar as I'm able to be autonomous. I'm optimistic insofar as I see other people like yourself and everyone else who's here who are aware of these trends that are going on in the larger society, and instead of complaining and griping about it, we're actually trying to build an alternative that will last. That makes me very optimistic in the big picture, but insofar as, America surviving as we know it.
Oh, I couldn't care less. I mean, no
Right.
offense to anybody
Sure.
because I understand the principles very well, and that's what it's about. It's not about the people. You know what I mean? It's about the ideas, self-ownership, and being able to create your own life. That's
Right.
kind of important. But yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
Well, no, that's fine. I mean, so all of this, I think, is borne out by history, where big established things fall down, and then the people who were kind of autonomous on the outskirts, they wind up being okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way history has played out. The one thing that's different now: the Romans didn't have drones, Stalin didn't have Facebook.
Sure.
Hitler didn't have a GPS in every person's pocket.
Right.
We didn't have the internet on which everyone feels almost obligated to spend hours a day on. And now this is I think it's a qualitative difference. It's not just like, oh, well, sure, Hitler had technology. They had telephones and telegraphs and stuff. Yeah, they did. But you know what? A telegraph is not the same as Google Maps. It just isn't. And I think that even as there are people on the outskirts, there are people like us. How many, is your 3G, 4G on? Someone's is.
Yeah.
We are nailed into these networks,
Yeah.
and to me that's a concern. Now that I don't think it's hopeless. I'm not trying to be a big downer.
No, dude,
but,
no. You're absolutely right. I mean,
yeah,
the thought of Hitler having access to the technology that exists now is a harrowing thought. And like I said earlier, I believe whatever it is, the tool is neutral.
Mm-hmm.
But like we can use it for positive ends, but we're not using it for positive ends. It's mostly very toxic, and Google's taking all this information. I could go on and on, right? Like
Yes.
That's not good in the sense of that word, right? But I guess really what I want to focus on then is what can be done in the meantime. Like I can see this is history repeating itself. Institutions are basically built to collapse. I'm fine with that. I mock the institution. I can't help it. It's just my millennial nature, I guess.
Hell yeah.
I'm on the older side of millennial, but whatever I am, what I am.
Uh-huh.
So I don't care about that. I don't care if this institution dies, whatever. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care about the tradition so much as I do the essence of the thing and humanity itself, frankly. So in the meantime, thinking about that, since you've done some research, what are some things that we can do or continue to do to basically insulate ourselves, I guess, from these musings of sociopaths telling us that we can have it all?
Well, as I said earlier, there are 4 or 5 cardinal virtues. Or not virtues, rather, but values that you can foster in your own life. And those, again, are food, wealth, the education of your children, your own intellectual capability, and then underlying all of them is the ability to actually physically defend yourself. Focus on those 5 things first, and whichever one is more applicable to you at any given moment, hit that one first. You don't expect to develop some kind of permacultural agorist paradise in your backyard overnight. Don't aim too big. A single tomato plant or a little herb garden, which you can do in an apartment. You don't need to have acres of land to be productive. Just get thinking and be creative about different ways. If you can save $5 you otherwise would have spent at the grocery store, well, that's a win. Not because you're saving fiat currency, but because in the end, though that oregano or whatever that you may have bought is actually more valuable than the money. It's a true resource, and it grows out of the ground. Okay? Money doesn't grow on trees, but you know what? Shit that's more valuable than money grows on trees. So let's do that. Focus on that. Number 1 is the food, the wealth, and those kind of go hand in hand. How are you spending your time is another thing. Everyone's got a job, and I understand. Maybe you're not in a position to quit your job tomorrow. Neither am I. Fine. But what are you doing when you're not at work? I know you're not at work 12 hours a day, 12 hours, or 24 hours a day. What do you do when you get home? Do you drink a beer and watch Netflix? I get that. But maybe only make that for Friday night. Maybe there's something else you could be doing with that off time. Find something that you're interested in and pursue it. And then also, education of your children is huge. And I don't have kids, and so part of me feels a little guilty talking about this one, simply because I haven't walked the walk, although I do plan to. But regardless of whether or not I've done it, or
I'll
if
be
it's
honest,
difficult,
the perspective of a child might even be better. You know
Mm.
what I'm saying? To help illuminate what a parent should do. You know what I'm saying? I
Yeah.
remember when I was a kid, and I don't mean to cut you off, so please hold your thought.
Sure.
I wanted to write a book about parenting as a child, and I swear to God, it would have been a bestseller. You know what I mean? If I would have
fantastic.
actually done that, like, it was a great thought. I could have been like a millionaire kid. And
That is a really good idea, actually.
yeah. So if you got a kid, see if they'll do that and write it backwards. You know.
There you go.
Letters.
He's giving these ideas away for free,
There
ladies
you
and
go.
gentlemen. You know?
But no, you're saying, childcare, and education, self-education, really.
Regardless of how difficult it may be, and I'm sure it is, and I'm sure people aren't always in the position to do it, but that does not change the fact that it's probably the most important thing. It just is. And sometimes the most important thing is the most difficult thing. I'm sorry, I didn't make it that way, but that's the way it is. And to go back to Plato's Republic, there's a bit in the book where they're talking about this utopia of theirs, and they come to this conclusion that it's so convoluted and complicated. It's got all these very rigid systems that uphold it, that they're all like, there's no way we could ever do this. And Socrates kind of chuckles, and he's like, well, yeah, you're right. There is no way we can do this unless you took everyone in the city who's over the age of 10 and got rid of them. And we just start from scratch with 10-year-olds and below.
Jeez.
That's how you do it. And I don't believe that Socrates was authoritarian in his intent. I think he was pointing out that, look, if you can get the kids, you get the minds of the future. You can actually change the society.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure everyone is familiar. Hitler said the same thing.
That's right.
The book of Leviticus says the same thing.
Sure.
This is not esoteric knowledge.
Right.
You know, if you can get the kids, then you got the adults.
Right.
So I would say that making sure that strangers who work for these institutions that demand your dependence aren't the ones raising your kids for you while you're working a job you hate.
Yeah, that's a
Sorry.
lose-lose.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unfortunate. And most of us grew up that way too. So, and it's what they talk about as like a generational curse, really.
Mm.
You know, it's like it's been inherited over time, down and down and down and down. And of course, we get the fortunate pleasure of healing all these, wounds from ancient fucking. But whatever. But like, yeah, I guess I just want to harp on like, it's ours to do the healing, and it's okay. It's not anybody else's necessarily fault. It's just been like a generational sort of shift over time. He's saying like, if you can take those 10-year-olds and below and then raise them up, well, what they've done is they've said, okay, well, we'll just take a little bit, more and more, getting, the teaching the kids and making that shift more gradual, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Yes. Instead of being like, we get rid of everybody, but over time you can just implement that shift a little bit.
Absolutely. The incrementalism is a tremendous weapon of the utopian, and interest that gets into modern utopianism as opposed to ancient utopianism, I think, where the idea of progressivism is a very modern idea, and it's highly effective for precisely that reason. Is you don't take 100% on day one.
Right.
You start with 1%, and you resign yourself to the fact that this is going to be a 100-year project or whatever. And yes, it's a long haul, but that's the way to do it because people don't notice.
It's better too, like even from like a marketing strategy point of view, because you're actually connecting with people, and that's what people want. They want to be connected with. So they'll believe whatever system that their friends believe, if they're, being, brought into a group, like people just, they will open up to that because, it's just human nature in a lot of ways.
It's progressivism, like small p progressivism is like an app with in-app purchases.
Yeah.
So the app is $1 and here's this wonderful game.
So good.
Now, if they had opened up and saying, "Look, this is a $50 app," no one's gonna buy it.
Exactly.
But over time, I can get that $50 out of you.
Yeah.
So that's the way it works.
As much
It's more
as they hate
effective.
capitalism, that is like the Marxists have the greatest like marketing campaigns.
Oh, oh yeah.
It's fucking amazing.
Good
right?
Lord.
Or quote unquote hate capitalism. Let's even just say that
Right.
because it's kind of silly. But yeah. But I would add to that. Is there anything else that you can maybe say regarding people? I would add building community. That's something I'm very passionate about. Just connecting like we're having the opportunity to do now, and and I connect online as well. And I'll stand on that soapbox of technology being neutral, although I'm being certainly my information is being taken from me. But any way I can connect to like-minded people, I'm going to do that. And then obviously trying to do more and more private type of networks and things like that, moving forward.
Yes, I agree. I think that the communities that you focus on working with are going to foster those 4 or 5 cardinal values. The fourth one was we left off with educating your kids.
Yes.
Number 4, clean your own mind. Make sure that you're not falling for tricks. And that's not to say you're going to be perfect.
No.
But just be self-aware, at the very least, that you're a human being who's liable to make mistakes. You've done them before. I bet you can think of some. So remember that about yourself, and I would recommend maybe learning some basic logic. You can do so very easily these days. Go to the library or go on the internet. You can find people teaching logic. Actually, I have a history of logic series on my podcast, if anyone wants to check that out.
Cool, yeah.
But all of those things should be the result of the communities that you foster. Because, as the internet era has shown us, we can join a community that's garbage. Community in and of itself is not necessarily good, just like any other tool. You could join a community of Nazis or, whatever.
Exactly.
Or
well, that's kind of what I mean, too.
Yeah.
I think subconsciously we just pick up on things, too, and we get that validation of self-worth from being accepted into a group, and that tribalism sort of gene kicks in. And so we're open and accepting to ideas that may not have our best interests in mind.
Exactly.
But it's just even part of that. So
that's the trick. That's part of the trick of the utopian in the first place, is to get, hey, we're all working towards this one thing, and it's going to be wonderful. It really satisfies that base need to be a part of a community, and yet all the while they're trying to make you more dependent on something that's external from yourself. So I would say focus on building communities that when you walk away, you're gaining something. You're gaining some level of independence, which it sounds almost counterintuitive. Like you want to join a community to be independent? It sounds like opposites, but really it's not. Because the stronger the individual is, the stronger the community becomes. If I have more, then you all have more because we're close to each other, we care about each other. And yes, of course, I'm going to prioritize, my resources are mine first. But if there's a group of people I'm surrounded with who I can trust, I'm actually going to take care of those people. And I'm not going to be obliged to donate my surplus to some faceless Borg that doesn't care about me 300 miles away, that's going to distribute it to poor people. No, they're going to sell it for money to buy bombs to kill people.
Sure.
Right. So
Right.
the independence coupled with the idea of building communities.
Interdependence, right?
Sure.
And so this is something that I've said a bajillion times, and I'm never going to stop. But you can't become interdependent until you are independent first. There's just no skipping that step. A lot of people, myself included, I wanted to go from codependency to interdependency. It sounded like a fun leap, but unfortunately, it's just not the way that nature works. You can't progress that way.
Nope.
So the fifth and hidden one would be.
I would say that the one that you really need, because if you don't have that, then it's all worth potatoes. Is being able to actually physically defend yourself. This is where your firearms and your martial arts come in. It's amusing to me about the idea of physical self-defense, how in a way it's an ideal that transcends political distinctions. I know that obviously in the United States there are the gun control people, but those tend to be more moderate types. Even if you find like radicals, be they left-wing radicals or right-wing radicals, they're all very red-pilled on the idea of firearms. Like, oh yeah, like we know that we need it. I mean, Marx himself wrote, like, if the government tries to disarm you, then you know it's time to revolt.
Right.
Something to that effect.
Well,
and that's just acknowledge, despite the fact I have tremendous ideological differences from Marx, he's simply right about pointing out that if you can't back up your own control of resources with violence, then you really don't have those resources. You have them so long as other people with arms are going to let you. Now, I know that might not fit into some very tidy and benevolent worldview, but I don't believe that such a thing is actually tangible. If I did, I would be a utopian, that everything was just nice and we could all get along. The reality is there are bad people, and they will be perfectly happy to take advantage of you and take advantage of your work and reap the fruits of your labor and have no problem sleeping at night after having done so.
Sure.
And so the simple reality is, if you want to maintain that food independence, that educational, intellectual, and wealth independence, you're going to have to know how to defend yourself. Simple. There's no getting around that. And perhaps now more than ever, although even now, I take that back. It's always been the same. No matter whether you were living in 500 BC or right now, the threat of external theft, the threat of resources being removed from your interdependent community, it's always there. I don't care if you live in the nicest suburb or the worst place in Sudan. You know, it's gonna happen at some point or another. You're gonna need to know how to defend yourself.
Right on.
So.
Well, cool. Those are great things. Yeah. Thank you so much for kind of going through that and exploring this idea with me. So I'm very well on the same page with you. I definitely want to see people be more independent, more interdependent, build community, and get away from centralization, specifically. So I think those are all very good takeaways. And tell people just one more time, Daniel, where they can find your work.
Sure. So the book and the podcast are both called The Story of Nowhere. And my website, where you can find all of that stuff and some more, is storyofnowhere.com. It's all very easy to remember.
That's awesome. I love it. It's really, really cool. The book looks awesome, and I'll definitely have links for all that stuff in the show notes. Thanks, everybody, for checking this out. Be sure to check out Daniel's work. That's Daniel McCarthy, The Story of Nowhere. Peace out, everybody. Thanks so much.
Thank you.